In the bustling city of Meridian, where the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of fiery oranges and reds, illuminating the world with a passionate glow, a peculiar courtroom drama unfolded. The streets were alive with the sounds of honking cars, chattering pedestrians, and the distant hum of city life. But all attention within this segment of the grand metropolis was focused on one particular courtroom. Here, Judge Fibber McPhail, a figure whose presence commanded attention with his stern countenance and unyielding rulings, presided over a case that would leave an indelible mark on those who witnessed it. Before him was Mrs. Alicia Xylophone, a woman of gentle disposition and immense kindness, whose soft-spoken nature belied the weight of the situation. Her very presence contrasted sharply with the heavy atmosphere of the courtroom. She was a simple woman, dressed in a modest yet elegant ensemble of soft blues and grays, her attire reflecting her quiet confidence rather than seeking any show of attention. Sitting in the defendant's chair, she cast her eyes downward, the fingers of one hand nervously entwined with those of the other, clutching her purse as though it were a lifeline amidst the storm. As the day began, it echoed the routine of any other within the courthouse. The rhythmic sound of footsteps reverberated through the marble halls, a constant reminder of the lives intertwined with the justice system. The clock struck the hour with a resounding chime, reverberating through the air, marking time in a place where time itself often felt suspended. The courtroom was a solemn chamber, draped in shadows and light, where the scent of polished wood mingled with the faint but unmistakable odor of injustice, and the whispers of hope lingered like ghosts amongst the panels. Judge McPhail, a tall man with a pronounced balding pate, was known for his reputation as a judge who did not shy away from making his point known, often using dramatic pauses to draw in his audience. He adjusted his spectacles, their frames reflecting the dim light of the room, revealing eyes that seemed to scrutinize every detail before him with a mix of authority and skepticism. His name tag, inscribed with Fibber McPhail in a font that was equal parts ostentatious and chillingly foreboding, hung prominently on his robe, as though it served as a warning of his undeniable presence. Clearing his throat in a resonating fashion that echoed against the walls, Judge McPhail prepared to call the case before him. The stillness in the room was palpable. A tense silence wrapped around each spectator, creating an atmosphere charged with anticipation. He leaned forward slightly, peering over the rim of his spectacles at the assembled audience, and announced with a voice that commanded authority, "Case number 45,837, the state versus Mrs. Alicia Xylophone." His words sliced through the thick air, setting the stage for a trial that was destined to escalate far beyond the minor traffic violation with which Mrs. Xylophone had been charged, igniting the latent prejudices that swirled around the judge's deeply ingrained beliefs that threatened to undermine the very fabric of justice. As the murmurs began to circulate among the spectators, the stage was set for a confrontation not just between the law and an individual, but between the ideals of fairness and the harsh reality of bias. An inevitable clash in the courtroom of Judge Fibber McPhail. Mrs. Xylophone's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and indignation, the sudden surge of emotion coursing through her like electricity. She was acutely aware of the burden that her skin color carried in the eyes of certain individuals, especially within the confines of this predominantly white town where every glance felt like an unspoken judgment. It was an all too familiar weight, one that pressed down on her shoulders and quickened her heartbeat as she found herself at the center of this awkward and unnerving confrontation. The prosecutor, a young lady named Miss Cipher, stood across the aisle, presenting her evidence with an air of self-satisfaction that nauseated Mrs. Xylophone. With an insidious smirk on her lips, Miss Cipher's eyes gleamed like a feline enjoying the thrill of a chase, her prey helpless, trapped in the harsh spotlight of the courtroom. "Your Honor," she began, her voice smooth and venomous, unfurling like a serpentine coil of condescension. Mrs. Xylophone was caught exceeding the speed limit by 5 miles per hour on Elm Street, a clear violation of the traffic code that should not be overlooked. Each word dripped with a chilling certainty, underscoring the gravity of the accusation while shrouding her opponent in a veil of disdain. Judge McPhail, a figure whose demeanor radiated an unsettling blend of authority and contempt, nodded gravely, his expression a stony testament to his indifference. His silver hair glimmered under the courtroom lights, framing a face that seemed to be carved from marble, etched with years of skepticism. He leaned back in his chair as if contemplating a great philosophical query, steepling his fingers in an omniscient manner that suggested he relished the power he wielded. "Mrs. Xylophone," he said, his voice low and resonant, "do you have anything to say for yourself?" His tone was sharp, a reminder of the reality that loomed large above her like an impending storm. Taking a deep breath that filled her lungs with a mix of anxiety and resolve, Mrs. Xylophone stood taller, though the tremor in her voice belied her efforts. "Your Honor," she began, her words spilling forth with a rush of urgency, "I was rushing to the hospital. My child was in an accident." Each syllable weighted with the raw desperation of a mother's plea, infused with the very essence of her fear for her child's well-being. She could feel the eyes of the courtroom bore into her, some filled with skepticism, while others flickered with the intrigue of a sensationalized narrative. In that moment, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, a rhythmic reminder of the stakes resting heavily on her shoulders, all while she clung desperately to the hope that empathy might pierce through the cold veneer of judgment that surrounded her. "Tisk, tisk," clucked Judge McPhail, his tone icy and devoid of any warmth or empathy. The sound seemed to reverberate through the cold, sterile atmosphere of the courtroom, a sharp reprimand that cut through the murmurs of the audience like a knife. "Rules are rules, madam," he continued, his voice laced with a heavy dose of authority. "They are not to be bent for personal emergencies." The courtroom audience, a motley gathering of weary faces bearing the weight of life's burdens, a few individuals with blank, indifferent stares, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had all heard the sordid whispers of Judge McPhail's infamous prejudices, but to witness them firsthand in the confined space of the courtroom was a sobering experience. It was as if a thick cloud of tension had settled over them, amplifying their apprehensions and discomfort. Mrs. Xylophone felt the weight of the room pressing down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak, suffocating and relentless. She felt exposed under the scrutinizing gazes of the spectators, but in that moment, determination surged within her. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and met Judge McPhail's cold stare with a quiet resolve that defied the oppressive atmosphere. "I understand, Your Honor. I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside her. While she spoke, Judge McPhail busied himself with a piece of paper on his desk, his pen moving with an almost grotesque grace, akin to that of a sledgehammer stripping away any semblance of humanity left in the proceedings. The scratching of the pen against paper underscored the tension in the air, creating a rhythm that seemed to mock her plight. With a sudden, brutal motion, he slammed his gavel down onto the sound block with an echoing thud, punctuating the moment with gleeful malice. $300 or 50 hours of community service? Take your pick, madam, he declared, relishing the power he wielded in that moment. The words hung heavy in the air, met with gasps of disbelief and shock from those present. The fine was exorbitant, excessive even, not just disproportionate to the alleged infraction, but a blatant demonstration of the judge's disdain for the very concept of mercy. Mrs. Xylophone felt the blood drain from her face, the stark contrast of her sudden pallor against the vibrancy of her attire palpable to those observing. As her heart raced, she glanced around for any sign of compassion, seeking solace in the familiar faces among the audience. Desperation clawed at her as she scanned the expressions of her peers, hoping for a glimmer of understanding or solidarity in the grim proceedings. But their faces revealed nothing, only the emptiness of indifference and resignation to the whims of the court. Her gaze soon fell upon a new face in the back of the room, a man with a stoic gaze that pierced through the heaviness of the courtroom. The badge gleaming on his chest caught the light, a stark reminder of authority and law, yet there was something in his expression, an unwavering strength. In that moment, his presence stirred a flicker of hope within her. Perhaps he could understand. Perhaps he might lend an ear or a helping hand in this ruthless trial. As the judge continued to expound on the implications of her choices with a self-satisfied flair, Mrs. Xylophone found herself drawn to the man in the back, silently pleading for an ally in the harshness that enveloped her. His gaze remained steady, and in it she sensed a complexity, an understanding of the precarious balance between rule and compassion, justice and mercy. Even within the confines of a courtroom defined by rules, there existed the potential for understanding. Perhaps, she mused, not all hope was lost. The man, Chief Pythagoras Zebrafish, had only recently been transferred to the small but vibrant town of Meridian. This seemingly innocuous relocation, however, carried with it the weight of great expectations and an underlying current of tension. Chief Zebrafish had arrived not just with a few possessions and a badge, but armed with a formidable reputation for fairness and integrity, a quality that stood out in stark contrast to the existing power structure of the town, which had long suffered under an outdated regime of favoritism and corruption. He took a moment to survey his new surroundings, his sharp eyes narrowing as they took in the chaotic scene before him. His hand gripped the back of the nearby bench tightly, as if anchoring himself in the face of a storm. For Mrs. Xylophone, the sight of the man rendered in the crisp uniform of a chief of police ignited a spark of hope deep within her heart. There he stood, her husband, Pythagoras Zebrafish, his very presence a beacon of justice, illuminating darkened corners of a town that often seemed shrouded in shadow, where whispers of dissent echoed off the walls of the local taverns and alleys. She felt a swell of pride, tempered by the uncertainty that surrounded their life together in this new chapter. Meanwhile, Judge McPhail, irreversibly ensconced in his own world of arrogance and self-satisfaction, continued to scribble away at his papers, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring right next to him, as if the arrival of Chief Zebrafish had not just entered the room, but had altered its very atmosphere. But it was not merely the title of Chief of Police that defined the man known as Zebrafish. It was the reputation that preceded him like an aura, a reputation built upon years of uncompromising dedication to justice and community service. His name alone was a compelling story, a testament to his unconventional approach to life. The name Pythagoras evoked images of ancient wisdom, rooted in mathematics and philosophy, suggesting a mind capable of complexities and insights far beyond the ordinary. In contrast, the whimsical image of a zebra fish evoked a sense of playfulness and adaptability, emblematic of the way he navigated the intricacies of human dynamics with a touch of humor and grace. His piercing eyes, reminiscent of the gleaming scales of his namesake, sparkled with a depth of understanding rarely seen in those who wield power. They held both the strength of conviction and the warmth of empathy, reflecting his unwavering resolve to uphold justice while remaining connected to the humanity of those he served. In the sea of indifference and corruption, Chief Zebrafish stood out as a guiding force, ready to challenge the status quo and mend the fabric of a community that hung in the balance. His arrival heralded a new era, one filled with possibility and the promise of change as he prepared to confront the entrenched powers that sought to maintain their grip on a town hungry for renewal. As the judge solemnly announced the punishment, an air of gravity filled the courtroom, enveloping everyone in its weighty embrace. Chief Zebrafish, a figure of authority known for his diplomacy and steadfast judgment, could no longer contain himself. Rising from his seat with deliberate purpose, he commanded the attention of the room, which immediately fell into a profound hush that felt almost like a collective gasp, as if time itself had suspended its relentless march. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, casting elongated shadows that danced across the court's polished wooden floor. Its golden rays, usually a source of warmth and light, seemed to dim in response to the escalating tension. The atmosphere grew heavy with uncertainty, as if the very air had chosen to hold its breath, bracing for the imminent confrontation. "Your Honor," Chief Zebrafish began, his voice cutting through the silence with a calm yet steadfast authority that resonated in every corner of the room. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." His words, though mild in tone, suggested an underlying force, one that hinted at a deeper complexity lying beneath the surface of this judicial proceeding. Judge McPhail, a man of experience yet unaccustomed to such disruptions, looked up from his position on the bench, the surprise clear in his expression, intensifying the tension in the air to a palpable level. "Chief Zebrafish," he stammered, his brows knitted together in a combination of confusion and concern. "What brings you here?" The inquiry hung in the air, drawing even more eyes toward the hesitant yet determined figure of the chief. "A wife?" Chief Zebrafish replied succinctly, his gaze unwavering as it locked onto Mrs. Xylophone, whose expression flickered between disbelief and intrigue. "My wife." The proclamation sent ripples of shock and anticipation throughout the courtroom. Those gathered could hardly process the impact of his declaration. Miss Cipher, who moments ago had strutted through the proceedings with an air of smug confidence, now stood rooted in place, her self-assured smile fading swiftly into a mask of uncertainty and concern. The audience, electrified by the unfolding drama, leaned in closer, a collective breath held as they awaited what would come next. "Your wife?" Judge McPhail repeated, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized Chief Zebrafish, attempting to gauge the depths of this unexpected intrusion. The atmosphere in the courtroom thickened with intrigue as whispers began to ripple through the crowd. The stakes had dramatically shifted, and all present sensed that they were on the brink of a revelation that could alter the entire narrative of the case before them. "Indeed she is," stated Chief Zebrafish with unwavering resolve, his authoritative gait towards the bench seeming to imbue the very marble floor underfoot with a palpable sense of purpose. "And as her husband, I feel it is my solemn duty to inform you that the circumstances surrounding her violation are far more pressing than you have been led to believe." As his words hung in the air, the judge's expression darkened visibly, the contempt previously dancing in his eyes contorting into something more visceral, something a touch closer to fear. "And what, pray tell, do you know about her circumstances that I don't?" Judge McPhail challenged, his voice taut with impatience, the lines etched upon his brow deepening with each syllable. "Only what she has just shared with you," Chief Zebrafish replied, his tone steady and unwavering, reminiscent of the calm horizon that stretches out over the sea. "However," he continued, letting the weight of his next words sink in, "perhaps, as her sentencer, it would have been prudent for you to inquire more deeply into the context and details before hastily issuing such a severe punishment." The judge's complexion flushed an angry shade of red, the veins in his neck throbbing like a live wire. His nostrils flared violently, reminiscent of a bull sensing a challenge in the air. "Are you questioning my judgment, Chief Zebrafish?" he roared, his authoritative veneer cracking just slightly under the pressure of this unexpected opposition. "I am," Chief Zebrafish declared resolutely, the firmness of his tone resonating like the strike of a gavel. "And I firmly believe that a thorough review of the evidence, alongside a careful examination of the circumstances surrounding this situation, is not just warranted, it is absolutely essential." He paused, letting his words linger, allowing the unexpected turn of events to wash over the courtroom. The tension in the air was electric, the weight of the chief's assertion hanging heavily, as both the judge and the court took a moment to grapple with the gravity of what had just been stated. Chief Zebrafish stood tall, a pillar of conviction amid the surging tides of doubt and uncertainty that enveloped the room. The courtroom watched, transfixed, as the two men faced off, their exchanged words becoming an intricate dance of power and principle. Each statement was crafted with precision, cutting through the air as if the very fate of justice hung in the balance. Mrs. Xylophone, sitting quietly in the back, felt a gentle hand squeeze hers. Her husband's grip, both reassuring and warm, grounded her amid the swirling tensions of the trial. She could feel the undercurrents of emotion and conflict ebbing and flowing through the room, amplifying her sense of anticipation. At the front of the room, the judge, a stern figure with an aura of authority, held his gavel tightly, its polished wood reflecting the stark light overhead. Yet, in that moment of confrontation, he felt it tremble in his hand, a clear acknowledgement that he was grappling with a reckoning far greater than a simple case. The gravity of his earlier decisions weighed heavily upon him, and as he scanned the room, he felt the tides of disapproval rising against him like an unrelenting wave. The collective gaze of the crowd was like a mirror, each pair of eyes revealing the ugliness of the prejudice that had taken root in the very foundation of his rulings. With a huff of resignation, the judge finally spoke. "Very well, Chief. I'll consider reducing the fine," he conceded, the words slipping from his lips as he waved the proverbial white flag in acknowledgement of the truth that lay before him. But Chief Zebrafish, undeterred by the judge's less than enthusiastic compliance, pressed on. "It's not just the fine, Your Honor. It's the principle that we must uphold. This courtroom should be a place of justice, not a stage for prejudice. We cannot allow bias to color our decisions or diminish our collective integrity." His tone was resolute, each syllable forging a bridge over the chasms created by ignorance and bias. The tension crackled in the air as the judge's jaw clenched tightly in silent protest. He was painfully aware that he had been bested by the power of conviction. Deep in his heart, he understood that the silence of compliance had become complicity, and with a begrudging nod, he finally relented. "I agree to drop the charges entirely," he declared, a reluctant acceptance that echoed through the chambers like a burst of summer thunder. A wave of murmurs swept through the audience, rippling like a tide of approval that surged toward Chief Zebrafish, empowering him in his stand against injustice. Mrs. Xylophone felt an immense weight lifted from her shoulders, as if the air around her had transformed into something lighter, something buoyant. At that serendipitous moment, the sun outside the courthouse windows chose to break free from the horizon, casting a warm, golden light into the chamber. The rays streamed in, kissing the walls and filling every shadowed corner with illumination. It was as if the very essence of justice had pierced through the dark clouds that had long shrouded Judge McPhail's heart. The light poured in, illuminating the path ahead, a promise of hope and renewal as justice began to reclaim its rightful place. And so, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue over the quaint town of Meridian, there emerged a palpable shift in the atmosphere, marking the dawn of an exciting new chapter. The once unyielding scales of justice, irrevocably tipped by the oppressive weight of Judge McPhail's authority, found a renewed balance, largely due to the indomitable spirit of Chief Pythagoras Zebrafish. His tireless work championing equality, paired with the quiet strength and steadfast dignity of his beloved wife, Elysia, paved the way for a brighter future. The surname Xylophone, which had previously lingered in hushed tones among the courthouse's shadowy corners as a symbol of divisive tensions, began to resonate loudly throughout the community, embodying hope and signaling the promise of significant change to come. In the days that unfolded after that pivotal traffic court showdown, the tale morphed into local folklore, eagerly exchanged in the intimate settings of barbershops, where hair clippings floated like leaves in mid-autumn, and beauticians' chairs, where personal stories were woven alongside tales of resilience. It spilled over into the comforting atmosphere of the local diner, where steaming cups of coffee were shared, alongside laughter and discussions that lingered long past the time for simple meals. Heated debates ignited the often stifled discussions within the hallowed halls of the city council, transforming what had been a static acceptance of the status quo into a vibrant dialogue about justice and equity. The citizens of Meridian, regardless of their backgrounds, whether black or white, felt a stirring deep within them, a rekindled flame of hope that had lain dormant for far too long. They began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the persistent tide of prejudice and discrimination could finally be turned in favor of justice and inclusivity. For Judge McPhail, this encounter served as a powerful wake-up call, a stark and undeniable reminder that the winds of change were sweeping through the world around him. With the realization that he could either adapt to this evolving landscape or find himself irretrievably swept away by the relentless tide of progress, he made a conscious decision to reevaluate his approach. It was a transformative journey for him. His rulings gradually evolved into models of fairness, showcasing an unwavering commitment to justice that had previously been absent. The harshness of his demeanor softened considerably. He began to listen more and engage with an open heart. Although the whispers of his racist past clung to him like an unwanted shadow, they were gradually overshadowed by the demonstrable efforts he was making to right the wrongs of the past, a testament to the possibility of redemption and growth in a town striving towards a cohesive future. The collective journey of the community, once riddled with division, was now a tapestry being woven together, each thread symbolizing a shared commitment to a just society, and together they envisioned a meridian where hope flourished and understanding reigned. Miss Cipher, the prosecutor, stood in her office, a contemplative frown creasing her brow as she observed the remarkable transformation unfolding before her. The atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, a blend of anticipation and doubt swirling in her mind. She had anticipated a far more straightforward contest, one that might allow her to maintain her usual confidence and poise. However, as Chief Zebrafish eloquently articulated his vision for justice and equality, Miss Cipher felt the first chinks in her armor of skepticism. This was no ordinary opponent. He was a force of nature, and his words resonated deeply within her, prompting a reflection she hadn't expected. The certainty with which Zebrafish addressed the community stirred something in her, a realization that perhaps it was time for a shift in her own approach. The smugness that had previously colored her perspective began to evaporate, replaced by a steely determination that emerged from a newfound understanding of her role. She was determined to serve the people of Meridian without succumbing to any personal biases, vowing to uphold the principles of justice that she had once taken for granted. Meanwhile, the Zebrafish household, which had once been a quiet refuge steeped in love and resilience, buzzed with a vibrant energy that was almost contagious. Alicia, Chief Zebrafish's partner and pillar of strength, exuded a renewed sense of hope as she witnessed her husband bravely confront the very embodiment of the injustices that they had faced together throughout their lives. His courage inspired her, and together they felt an unbreakable bond forging itself anew, one that not only fortified their relationship, but also served as a beacon of what was possible for their community. Alicia's heart swelled with pride, knowing their love story was becoming an emblem of strength that their neighbors could look to for encouragement and inspiration in these tumultuous times. However, the victory they cherished was not without its looming challenges. Chief Zebrafish soon found himself embroiled in a struggle against those who felt threatened by his push for change. The shift in power dynamics ruffled the feathers of many who had benefited from the status quo, comfortable in their entrenched positions. In hushed tones, they whispered of retribution, their anxieties transforming into murmurs of a potential backlash that could unearth old wounds and forge new alliances in the shadows. The chief was acutely aware of the resistance he faced. He understood all too well that change could be a double-edged sword, one that could slice through the fabric of complacency, but also expose vulnerabilities that had long been buried. Yet, through the uncertainty and opposition, Chief Zebrafish remained steadfast in his resolve. His demeanor conveyed an unwavering strength. His eyes, ever perceptive and as balanced as the scales they symbolized, took in the town around him not as a battleground defined by conflicts, but rather as a vast canvas awaiting the vibrant brushstrokes of equality and justice. Every interaction, every confrontation, every decision he made became an opportunity to lay down the foundations for a community sculpted not by fear and division, but by understanding and unity. He knew that transforming Meridian into a place where everyone could thrive required more than just words. It demanded action rooted in compassion and a commitment to right the wrongs of the past. He fully intended to seize each of these moments as yet another opportunity to paint a brighter, more equitable future for all who called Meridian home. In the bustling police station that served as the heart of Meridian, the air grew thick with anticipation, almost palpable in its intensity. Officers, who had once been divided by the invisible lines of race, prejudice, and past grievances, began to perceive their chief in an entirely new light. No longer did he stand merely as a symbol of authority cloaked in a uniform. He emerged as a mentor, a guide, a beacon of hope illuminating the path toward unity and understanding. They observed him as he worked tirelessly, pouring his heart and soul into bridging the gaps that had long plagued their ranks. The chief shared his vision of a meridian where the badge was a symbol of protection and service, rather than a tool of oppression or fear. On the streets of Meridian, where once there had been distrust and tension, citizens began to notice a profound change in their once feared guardians. The blue uniforms that had previously inspired dread now exuded an air of comfort, security, and trust. The so-called zebrafish effect had taken hold with remarkable speed and potency. A sense of community began to emerge as the town felt the gentle ripples of a new tide washing over it, transforming relationships between officers and residents, and fostering an environment of cooperation and support. As the scene transitioned to the courtroom, a place traditionally steeped in drama and often contentious exchanges, a striking portrait was unveiled and hung prominently on the wall. It depicted a simple zebrafish, its vibrant stripes forming a beautiful tapestry that celebrated the colors of the rainbow. Beneath this vivid artwork, a plaque was carefully affixed, bearing the powerful words, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." These words served as an enduring reminder to everyone who passed through the courtroom doors that this was now a sanctuary of fairness and equity. It stood as a testament that in this space, amid the hustle and bustle of legal proceedings, everyone would be treated as equals before the law, regardless of their background or identity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a breathtaking array of colors across the sky, it painted the scene with the hues of a new dawn. Meridian stood on the precipice of monumental change, a pivotal moment that could reshape the town's future for generations to come. In the hearts of its citizens, hope flickered and burned brighter than the stars above, illuminating their dreams and aspirations for a just society. For in the shadow of the courthouse, where historical struggles had taken place, a battle had been won. A legacy of justice had been born, poised to inspire and uplift, marking the beginning of a transformative journey toward healing and reconciliation.